we all know where Al Gore stands when it comes to climate change. But what about the guy that says he's crazy? The anti-Al Gore and one of your favorite actors from around the world, both on the hour tonight.
What's going on? Come on in. Nice to see everybody. Hi. Welcome to the show. It's nice to be with you. I'm your boyfriend, George Strombolopoulos. Settle in if you can. We've done it. We've made it into October. It is officially October, which means the winter of our discontent is officially on. It's so cold. I know I'm in my late 30s now, let's be honest, people. And I've had too many winters here. Look, we have a big show tonight. I want to run down who will be on the show. But first, I got to take care of you. I want to just give you a little piece of advice, a little friendly reminder, because I'm your boyfriend. I care about you. It's 29 days till Halloween. Start planning your costume now. Because I know you. Because I am you. We wait too long. Every year I leave it to the last minute, and every year I have to go out as the same thing. I swear to God, I cannot do another series of Halloween parties dressed up as a sexy nurse. Plan it now. Speaking of sexy nurses, Clive Owen is here tonight. People very excited about that. Here's the thing. You watching at home, you've seen Clive Owen in lots of his big movie pictures and such. Perhaps you, like I first came to know him in The Croupier, an amazing film. But did you know, tomorrow is Clive's birthday. So Clive is actually in the green room right now. We purposely turned the television feed off so he doesn't know what I'm saying here. What we've got for Clive tonight is we're going to roll a gigantic cake. And we're going to take a volunteer from the audience to jump out of the cake. We've picked a guy. Are you ready for this, buddy? You're good? You're set, aren't you? Yeah, that's right, buddy. You're coming out of the cake. It will be a B-Day surprise. That's all coming up a little bit later on. Of course, I want to get to the first guest of the night. Look, you know, here in Canada, an awful lot of us talk about climate change. We did 1 million acts of green, thanks to you, an enormous success, because Canadians do care about the environment, regardless of what happens in Ottawa. And we've got a guy on the show tonight who says that you're wasting your time. He says you are wasting your time when it comes to climate change. What? Lord Christopher Monckton is his name. He's here. Let's set it up.
Okay, global warming. The general consensus is it's our own damn fault. And if we don't stop spewing out greenhouse gases, we're headed for disaster.
Our ability to live is what is at stake.
Well, that's one side of the story. The Al Gore side, you could say. But there's a growing camp out there that suggests Gore and company are full of it. Lord Christopher Monckton is in that camp. Monckton isn't actually a scientist. He was trained as a journalist and was high up at some pretty big papers in the UK. He also was a close advisor to former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. So how'd he get into the global warming thing? Glad you asked. Apparently, a few years ago, Monckton was recovering from an illness, and to pass the time, he decided to delve into the science of climate change. In 2006, he wrote an article called Climate Chaos? Don't believe it. Monckton says the Earth's temperature won't rise nearly as much as we've been told, and that we don't have much to do with global warming at all. How about all that scientific evidence we hear about? Flawed, Monckton says. Ditto for Gore's Oscar-winning film, An Inconvenient Truth. In fact, Monckton challenged Gore to a debate in 2007. Gore didn't bite, but that hasn't stopped Monckton. He trashes Gore for his stance on global warming to anyone who will listen.
He's no scientist, yet, like me, he made a movie about global warming, and it won an Oscar for Best Sci-Fi Comedy Horror.
Everybody, please welcome Lord Christopher Monckton. Good to see you, man. Welcome to the show. How are you? Nice to see you there. Oh, they're standing up. Nice. You know, sometimes when somebody gets to be a doctor, they get to play around and mess with people. When you get to be a lord, is that cooler than being a doctor when you mess with people?
What does the audience think of that? Would you rather be a doctor or be a lord? Hands up for a doctor. Hands up for a lord. Yes, let's hear it for Lord.
Does a lord get you any special privileges?
Indeed it does. Normally, talk show hosts are not allowed to talk to lords unless they have white gloves on, so you've slipped up there.
Oh, I was aware of it, sir. I just chose not to observe. That's all.
This is the trouble. In the Dominions, you don't get the reverence you expect.
Oh, I'd give you a shovel, sir. You can keep going if you like. The anti-Gore. You're called the anti-Gore. How did you get that title?
I think Al Gore doesn't like me very much because he made his mawkish sci-fi comedy horror movie. Anyone seen it? Don't bother. It's a very silly movie.
It's not a silly movie, and you know that.
Well, all right, it's a very silly movie.
No, it's not. You're talking about an inconvenient truth.
An inconvenient truth, that's right. And it says that the planet is about to fry, as he puts it. Now, it isn't about to fry, because actually the CO2 has an effect on temperature, but only about a sixth of what Al Gore thinks. He said sea level was going to rise by 20 feet immediately. But the year he said that, 2005, he bought a condo for $4 million in the St. Regis Tower, San Francisco, just feet from the ocean at Fisherman's Wharf. If he'd been right about the 20-foot sea level rise, he wouldn't have bought that condo.
Well, maybe he bought that condo because he wanted an aquarium. Which is always possible. So Al Gore's premise is that climate change is caused by humans, that we need to do something to rectify this now before it's too late. We may be at that brink. You disagree with all of that, some of that?
All of that, because all of the research on which his movie was based and all of the latest documents of the UN's climate change panel, the latest one was in 2007, are now out of date. Because new research has just come out, in which instead of trying to guess what the effect of CO2 on temperature is, now they've measured the effect of CO2 and all other greenhouse gases on temperature, and it is, as I've said, 1/6 of what the UN's last report thought it was. The paper which contains this result, written by one of the most eminent climatologists in the world, Professor Richard Lindzen of MIT, concludes that the warming we will get from the doubling of CO2 concentration that we will cause this century is not the 3.4 Celsius that the UN imagined it to be, but just, get this, 0.5.
So are you saying there is no climate change? Are you saying there is no climate change?
The climate has been changing for 4.5 billion years since the Earth first began to accrete an atmosphere.
Are you saying that humans are... So you're saying that humans have no impact on the climate?
Humans have an insignificant impact on the climate. It's almost negligible. So we're going to cause an increase, at worst, of around 0.5 degrees Celsius in the whole of the next 150 years. Now, would anyone regard that as a problem?
No. Why is it then, in your opinion, that... I mean, there are a group of people in your camp, and there are way more in the other camp.
How do you know that?
Well, because you hear them, we talk to them. I mean, just by doing research and reading, you can see that, and I know that just by simple research. There are more on one side than on another side, but I want to know, why do you think that is?
I think that is because it's mesmerically attractive to the scientific community to get a good scare going, because nothing gets you funding faster. Putting it bluntly, there are some people out there who have been falsifying the evidence, bending the truth deliberately. There are not many of them. What is worse is that there are many more who are willing to sit there and go along with this nonsense, because otherwise they might lose their tenure or lose their job, because it's become something so fashionable that nobody dare oppose it.
Do you equate the conversation about climate change or global warming with the conversation about surrounding environmentalism?
No, because there are many real environmental problems. Let's look at deforestation. Let's look at the encroachment of humans on the habitats of rare and vulnerable creatures. Let's look at industrial pollution, largely not in the West anymore, though there are still one or two defaulters. These are real, serious environmental problems that continue to require to be addressed. And I think it's incredibly important that we shouldn't divert attention from the real environmental problems and divert money and effort from them to address what has now been proven by measurement to be a non-problem.
You testified on behalf against Al Gore's film, didn't you? You said how many? Because you said that there were enormous inaccuracies in Al Gore's movie.
There are 36 quite serious scientific errors in it.
But I thought that the court ruled there were only 9, not the 36 you said.
The court only had time to consider 9. We only had a 3-day hearing. And because the British government, which was defending Al Gore because it wanted to send his movie to every school in England and expose vulnerable school children to it, the Department of Education fought every point as hard as it could, but on every single point that the judge heard in our favour because the film was so inaccurate. And the judge had very carefully heard both sides.
Well, the challenge with science is that scientific discovery evolves. And so you can make the best judgments you can with the information you have at the time. Science has been correct over the years and been ignored, and science has been incorrect over the years and been ignored. So it's about finding that balance. Inside a government, how do you make sure, like with the Margaret Thatcher, when you worked with her, how do you make sure that, because you know that there are lots of lobby groups on both sides, how do you make sure they get the right information?
With Margaret Thatcher, it was very easy because she had a sharp mind. You couldn't fool her with this kind of bilge about global warming. I was, in fact, the first person to draw it to her attention. I said, we are getting reports that CO2 is rising. It's clear that we are causing this. It's not yet clear what that is going to do in terms of temperature, but there is scientific concern. So I told her about this. And in due course, she set up the Hadley Centre for forecasting to address this and look at it. And the Hadley Centre now, it is fair to say, is one of the true believers in the new religion of global warming. But unfortunately, the Hadley Centre doesn't specialise in investigating the one question that matters, which is what is the effect, what is the magnitude of the effect of CO2 on temperature? If it is only going to be another ½ degree of warming over the next 150 years, then Houston, we do not have a problem.
Half a degree could affect a lot of habitats. Couldn't have a degree?
Yes, it would be largely beneficial because, of course, warm weather is better than cold weather. I can give you an example. How many species do you think live in the Arctic? Not very many. How many species live in the tropics? About 90% of all the world's species. Why? Because warmer and wetter is better than colder.
But don't we need all the species? Isn't that the whole idea of the ecosystem?
In that case, the warmer you get it, the more species you'll have. Speciation will occur much better in warm weather than in cold.
I've seen enough horror movies to know that the species in the warm tropics, that's where it gets scary. Like a lot of people...
I'm not going to argue against that.
No, that's right. A lot of people, when they want to clear their minds from their daily job, they go and they try to put a puzzle together. You clear your mind by trying to create a puzzle.
Yes, indeed.
We'll come back and talk about puzzles and Sudoku, and maybe some more about Maggie Thatcher. We'll be right back. And I know you've been waiting for it. Later on, the dashing Clive Owen is here.
I don't believe almost anything I read, but I really want to believe this, that you used to change your hair color based on Bowie's hair color?
At school, yeah.
Yeah? What's your favorite Bowie song? Can you have one?
There's too many. Yeah, there's too many.
The correct answer is Life on Mars.
Please come back next week on the program. Look at him. We love him. Michael Bublé is here. Michael Bublé makes his return to the show. We're back here on the hour with Lord Christopher Monckton. So we've talked about climate change, environment, and a little bit about Margaret Thatcher. How did you get Margaret Thatcher's attention? Was there a trick? You always hear about trying to get the leader's ear. How did you get the leader the ear?
The marvellous thing about Margaret Thatcher was that she had signals that she gave you to tell you whether she liked what you were doing for her or not. If you sent her a written note, it had to be no more than a page.
Was it a wink?
No, this is the written key, first of all. Squiggly lines meant, this is rubbish, mate.
Yeah.
Nothing at all meant, I'm not interested. Heavy underscorings with straight lines meant she was fascinated. I used to get the third of the three. But then the main thing was, if you went to see her in her study, which was a very nice, civilised sort of country house room in the middle of 10 Downing Street in London, old furnishing, slightly chintzy curtains and so forth. She would be sitting in her desk and she'd come over, and then you would talk for a few moments about what it was you wanted to catch her attention with. And you had to capture her in the first 20 seconds, otherwise you failed. But if you succeeded, and if she became really interested, she would tiptoe rather archly to the door, shut it in the face of whatever foreign ambassador or senior civil servant was waiting to see her, and then tiptoe again, even more archly, over to the bookcase where she would pull out a book, and behind it was a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. And she would say, I want to hear more about this, dear. And she would pour the whiskey, and then we would sit and drink. It wasn't terribly good whiskey,
Right.
but you could then be there for an hour and a half at a time.
Getting drunk with Margaret Thatcher.
Getting drunk with Margaret Thatcher.
Was she a good drunk or was she a nasty drunk?
She was actually a wonderful drunk. She could keep her concentration however much she drank.
Did she ever play puzzles? Did she make puzzles?
Yes, because when I left Number 10, the tradition was that one went in to see the Prime Minister, to take one's leave, and she would give you a signed photograph, and you had to give her a little piece of silver. Not a particularly fair exchange, you might think, except that little pieces of silver don't sell for much, but signed photographs by Margaret Thatcher are now worth many tens of thousands of pounds. So she knew what she was doing. But I gave her a 12-piece puzzle, which I designed, made in silver. And she was fascinated by this, because she'd never seen anything like it before. And 2 years later, her office got in touch, and they said, look, the whole business of governing Britain has come to a stop, because she can't put these 12 pieces back together. And, will you please send us the answer?
Did you?
Yes, I did.
Oh! You actually design puzzles, like you said.
Absolutely, yes.
And there's one called Eternity, which came out a while ago. It took 18 months to solve, and it was a complicated mathematical puzzle or something, but it was $1 million prize.
That's right.
And now you've come up with Eternity 2.
With a $2 million prize.
Can we see some of this? I mean, we're not going to give you the answer, obviously, because no one's figured it out yet.
That's a small portion of the puzzle.
So what are we trying to do here? What's the idea?
So what you're trying to do is, there you have just a 16-piece sample of it. And you see that each piece has to match the piece next to it. The colours and the shapes just have to match. That's it. That's the rules. And you have to make a 16 by 16 square in which all the pieces match up with their neighbours. And if you do that, and you're the first to do it, then you could be nearly as rich as me.
Nearly. Nearly. Will I get to be a lord?
You might even get that. The present government tends to sell them with the right number of box tops. So.
Lord Christopher Monkton is speaking all across Canada. For more information, go to our website, cbc.ca/the hour, and you'll find out all the places where he will be. It's great to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Well, thank you very much.
What are you doing?
Clive Owen, he's in there.
And I bet you like him, right?
God, yeah, who doesn't?
Yeah, right. You think he's dreamy? Well, the only thing you like about him is his stupid British accent. It's like, oh, hello, Jennifer. I'm Clive Owen. I'm British, I'm handsome, and tonight, I'm all yours. Hey, whoa, whoa. What are you doing?
Oh, God, that accent really is an aphrodisiac.
Inappropriate.
Hello, I'm a Clive Owen. I like the romance and the sex.
Ew, no.
I'm a Clive Owen. I'm a Clive Owen.
Oh, boy. Hello there. I know Christopher Monkton has got a lot of you on your computer about to send us an email. Bring it on at the hour at cbc.ca. By the way, if you go to our website, you can actually see, you can find the puzzle that Christopher and I were talking about before the break, and you can see it. The deadline to solve it, I believe, is the end of the year of 2010. So December 31st, 2010. You've got some time to put it together. If you are the person who actually solves this puzzle first, though, $2 million, yours. If no one solves it, he gets the money. Are you okay with that? $2 million. There you go. Clive Owen. Still to come on the program next week on the show, the creator of the CSI franchise, Anthony Zeiker, will be here, and Mitch Albom, the author that he's been on the show a couple of times, most notably Tuesdays with Maury, but a bunch of other stuff. He's got a new book called Have a Little Faith. He'll be here. Also from A Dragon's Den, Kevin O'Leary, and I'm very excited about this. He's got some great stand-up comedy. I'm a bit of a stand-up comedy nerd, so I like quality stand-up comedy, but he's a hell of an actor as well. If you've seen Arrested Development, you know Tobias David Cross is going to be here. The only man who got hair implants, and the implants rejected him. It's one of the greatest things. David's got a new book called I Drink for a Reason, which is probably something you've said before in the past. We actually have an exclusive excerpt from it posted on our blog, so go to The Hour's website and you can get it. So that's all coming up on The Hour. Of course, this Sunday on CBC, 8 o'clock, Battle of the Blades. It's actually, Battle of the Blades is a wonderful show because it bridges some gaps, if you will. Bridges gaps. Figure skating, hockey, finesse, brute, strength, all in one. Now, we've had on the show this week Ty Domi and Bob Probert. A lot of people talking about the combinations of figure skaters. But if you're perhaps not that into figure skating and you're not sure how they would even score this sort of thing, you need to add a little bit of excitement to the game. Well, you've come to the right show. One of the things I listen to every Sunday on a radio station in Toronto is called Inside the Lines. It's the best gambling radio show in the world. And if you don't gamble, you might want to start. Don't. If you do start, don't blame me. Blame like Rick Mercer or Mark Kelly. Tell them they told you to do that. I don't know. No, there's a radio show called Inside the Lines. It's on in Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, I believe Calgary, and Vancouver. And to help us set the line, how do you gamble on Battle of the Blades, is the host of that show, Jory Mittelstadt. We've just brought him in. We've messengered him. Hey, man, how are you?
I'm great, George. How are you, buddy?
And well, it's nice to see you. You look like you're in outer space, dude. Just kind of, where are you? In a pod somewhere?
Yeah, I have to keep my whereabouts unknown.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for coming on. I think we called you yesterday last minute going, how do you gamble on Battle of the Blades? So you've set the line. Tell me how you set the line, the odds for this.
Well, in terms of what a sports book does, I'll give you an example. This is what we would call a future book, where you're betting on an outcome that's going to happen down the road. So as an example, and actually the formula in terms of the overall odds is not dissimilar from the CFL odds to win the Grey Cup. So going into the season, there are 8 teams that have a chance to win the Grey Cup. There's a mathematical formula in terms of what the bookie, the sports book, would hold back in terms of their profit. And so we're able to use the same kind of formula in an overall sense because there are 8 pairs in Battle of the Blades.
And I think we can both agree, Jory, that Battle of the Blades is going to have far more of a ground game than the CFL will. That's a guarantee. Maybe the stuff in the air will be similar, but that's it.
Very, very good, George. You certainly thought that out. Excellent. Well done. In terms of, to answer the rest of the question, in terms of setting the actual odds that I know you have and we're going to talk about, it took a lot of time, research. No, I'm lying. What I did was what you would do is handicap the same way you would any other sporting event. You look at the participants, their accomplishments, and try and come up with who's the favorite and who's the long shot and fill in between.
Okay, so you took a look at, did you put things like age with amount of titles, with which hockey player? How do you set the odds for the combination? For example, you got Shaylin Bourne and Claude Lemieux. Shaylin Bourne, lots of finesse. Claude Lemieux, lots of skill, not so much finesse.
Yeah, what I did was you have a real mixture here in terms of the hockey players. You've got, and don't take this the wrong way, guys, you got some goons in here like Mr. Probert, Mr. Domi, who are known to drop the gloves, and that's where they earned their paycheck. And they have other guys who are known for their speed in scoring goals, like Glenn Anderson and Stéphane Richer. So as it related to this competition on the player side, I tried to look at what their strengths were as a hockey player and how that might translate into figure skating. Not an easy exercise, but that's what I tried to do. From the skater standpoint, I simply looked at their accomplishments. Some are more accomplished than others, even though all are very accomplished skaters. I don't want to take anything away from anybody. Also, I looked at if they were pair skaters, like Isabelle Brasseur was a world champion pair skater. You mentioned Shaylin Bourne. She was an ice dancer, so I gave a bit of an edge to those that had experience in pairs.
All right, let's see the lines then. So here are the lines. If you're going to gamble on Battle of the Blades, here's what you've done.
I'm not sure where you can actually wager on this, unless you know something I don't, but I was happy to set the odds for you.
Okay, so you think, so what I'm seeing there is that you got Glenn Anderson and you got Brasseur set to be the 2-to-1 odds, where you got Danico down at 20-to-1.
That is correct.
Now,
and it was using the formula that I talked about. I believe it or not, I did spend some time. I looked at everybody's accomplishments. The hockey players I was a lot more familiar with than the figure skaters, although I have to say I knew most of the figure skaters as well, being a sports guy for so many years. And Anderson, if you're not familiar, one of the great skaters of all time, a Hall of Famer, a great goal scorer, smooth as can be on the skates. And Isabelle, of course, with Lloyd Eisler, is a world champion pair skater. that combination led me to make them the favorite.
Well, you got Barb Underhill and Ron Duguay up. What do you got? It was 10-1 odds, I think, as we got. Now, Ron Duguay, if we're scoring for style and just the best hair, the Duke's still, he's had the best hair in hockey for like the last 3 decades, hasn't he?
Yeah, hard to argue with that. It's almost still a mullet, isn't it?
That's still a little bit.
A lot of credit.
Get those odds. So let's get those odds back up one more time so people at home can mark them down. Claude Lemieux 8-1. You got Probert at 15-1 and Domi at 18-1. You know that's going to drive Domi crazy. How did you get there?
Like we talked about a little bit earlier, those guys were not known for their skating prowess, shall we say. And they went a little further down the list, along with Ken Danico, who was a bruising stay-at-home defenseman, but not the swiftest on the skates. So those guys made their way down to the bottom of the list for that reason.
Nice. Jory, thanks so much, man. It's good to see you, bud.
Always a pleasure, George, anytime.
There you go. Jory Middlestat, host of Inside the Lines, an excellent radio show. By the way, Battle of the Blades is happening this Sunday, 8 p.m. on CBC television. Oh, my goodness, an awful lot happened in the world. Here's Mile a Minute. Alrighty. You want to start with the war in Afghanistan? We're going to go there. War in Afghanistan. Top U.S. commander there says he needs more soldiers. This is not an unfamiliar statement, but we're hearing numbers. He wants 60,000 more Americans in all. Guy's name is General Stanley McChrystal. He went on to give an assessment of the mission 8 years after the war. He said that in Afghanistan, basically, things are rarely as they seem, and the outcomes of the actions we take, however well intended, are often different than what we expect. He also said neither success nor failure can be taken for granted. Who put Yogi Berra in charge of the mission? The guy said everything except it ain't over till it's over. You know what? I'll save you some time. They're not sure how it's actually going there. Next month, there's a new book coming out about Bill Clinton's presidency. It's called The Clinton Tapes, and it is being described as, their words, an oral history. Next, big celebrations in China all week. 60 years ago, Mao Zedong and the Communist Party officially launched the new republic. Festivities went off without a hitch. Big military parade. They even had perfect weather. And that is always, I know you're an organizing bunch, and that's why we love you. You're planning a parade, be it small or large. And you're like, how can we be sure the weather's going to be there for us? China knows how to do it. They made it rain. The Air Force, the day before the big party, fired chemicals into the air. Whoosh. That's actually how they whoosh. To make sure that the skies were clear. Welcome to a new, greener China. Not only do they control the U.S. economy, but now the very skies above. And Canada, guess what? So much for being friendly and polite. Guess what changed? Liberal MP Carolyn Bennett testifying at a congressional committee on health care when Republican Senator Bob Corker, well, he unleashed a corker of his own, talking about you. What did he say? Take a look.
It's not really our country so much as the problem. It's the sort of the parasitic relationship that Canada and France and other countries have towards us.
Parasitic. Basically, it's all about prescription drugs. Corker says the U.S. does all the innovation, and then Canada turns around and actually makes drug prices affordable. Oh, really? Bennett made it very clear. Drug pricing is not some plot by Canada, that it's actually a global concern. But okay, Bob Corker, we'll stop selling your drugs on the cheap, but we want the telephone and basketball back. By the way, I'm just saying, I am convinced that those guys say things like that by making fun of Canadians so they can get on our show. I'm convinced. Because they know how Canadians are. We get all freaky out. The Clinton book, we joked about oral history, the Clinton tapes. The author is a guy named Taylor Branch, and I want you to know that he will be on the show on November the 3rd. So we'll get a lot more, some really cool inside stuff with Mr. Branch when he joins us on the show in November. All right, Clive Owen is here. He's got a brand new picture called The Boys Are Back. Here's his bio.
You know, George, you see Clive Owen now, and it's easy to think he's been around Hollywood forever. I mean, the guy was made to be a movie star.
What do you want? I want some and justice.
That voice, those rugged looks, and oh yeah, he's a pretty good actor too. But when you think about it, we only really got our first real taste of Clive when Croupier hit theaters here in 2000. He was a struggling writer working at a casino and looking pretty fine in a tux. Just saying.
I'm sorry, madam, we're not allowed to accept gratuities in the UK.
Clive was in his mid-30s there and relatively new to us, but he'd been acting most of his life. You see, Clive grew up in Coventry, England. He lived in public housing, his dad walked out when he was 3, so he had a pretty rough childhood. But over time, Clive got into acting. His first role, the Artful Dodger in a school production of Oliver. Well, he was hooked and dreamed of going to the prestigious Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. The response he got to that? Get real, Clive. Kids from Coventry don't go there. Well, Clive did go there, eventually. He just spent 2 years as a pool hustler in between. But by 26, he had his own hit TV show, playing a con man in Chancer.
You have just wasted my entire morning at the bank.
10 years later, Croupier, and I think you know the rest. The Bourne Identity, Closer, he got an Oscar nod and won a Golden Globe for that one, by the way. Clive also starred in Inside Man and set out to save mankind in Children of Men. His new film is called The Boys Are Back, and Clive plays a sports writer struggling to raise 2 boys after his wife's sudden death.
That is so high.
I know.
But if the wire breaks...
Oh, don't worry about the wire. The wire's fine. I'm trying not to think of that branch falling on him.
Everybody, please say hello to Mr. Clive Owen. Very good. There you go, right? Often you play dangerous roles and you get to talk about them, and there's a lot of nuances to playing a dangerous character. In this film, you get to play a dangerous character, but really kind of a very real, authentic character in a sense. You get to play a dad who's a single father who then has to deal with an estranged son who comes home. It's a lot to process in a character, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the really great thing about this film is it comes from a book of somebody's real experience. So the whole thing is completely rooted in a reality. And it was a very, very sort of brilliantly written script from this book that he wrote. It was, you know, it's based on real people, so it does feel different.
Depending on how you research a character, to play a guy that you know is a very real guy, and people watching in the theaters will either have married that guy, been the offspring of that guy, right, or be that guy. And so, and when it's a more authentic role,
I think that the thing that attracted me to this film is that there are things that everybody will relate to. It's a film about family. It's a film about parenting, and you know, at the beginning of the movie, my wife dies of cancer, and I'm left with a young 7-year-old boy. So there are lots of people who can relate to that. And then there's a whole film about him getting used to parenting, all the ups and downs. They have fantastically fun times. They have times that are very difficult. And then into the equation comes my 15-year-old boy from a previous marriage who's been living in England. We're now in South Australia. And so he wants to get to know his dad. So there are things that endless people will relate to. There are different things that will touch buttons in everybody.
That's things you can relate to.
Yeah.
You know, and so, I mean, I suppose you could relate to the 16-year-old kid who comes over, the 15-year-old kid as well. Do you get personally connected to those characters? I mean, because some actors have a tough time going through hard roles because they're so emotional about it. Are you like that?
I think it's very different when you act with children. Nicholas, who's 7 years old in this film, it's amazingly exposing acting with children because they're completely natural. It's not a honed talent. It's not something that is contrived. You're acting with the real thing, and if you act too much with children, you look like you're acting. You have to be responsive and alive, and it's challenging because they're completely real. So you have to work with that, and there's something hugely challenging but very exciting about that.
Do you is it easier for you to relate to play roles where you can directly relate to characters in it, or do you prefer to come from the outside?
I think it's an instinctive thing. I don't have to. I mean, I've played lots of characters I would never dreamed of doing the things that they've done, but it's an instinctive thing. There's something.
Telling me the guy in Closer is not true to who you really are. Is that what you're saying, Clive?
I'm not going to start swearing.
You can. It's Canada. It's quite like England that way.
But no, it's an instinctive thing, and you know, it is about. I do have to understand understand and relate. Like, I don't come from it from completely outside. I have to have an instinct and think, yeah, I kind of know what this is about and it's something that I want to explore. And in this film, I've never done a film that is so much about parenting. I've got 2 girls myself, and you know, it's a very rich world, parenting, and there are huge ups and downs, and it's a very complicated world as well. And to explore that in a movie was really, really satisfying, because it's something that I've never done in my work before.
When you rely on instincts, you have to have 100% faith in your instincts. And one of the things that happens as life goes on, sometimes your instincts fail you. When you rely on instincts as an actor, have you ever felt moments where you thought, that didn't work?
No, I've done the opposite though. I've had instincts and tried to refine them and do it. To be honest with you, I read a script, and often the initial instinct of what I have when I first read it is kind of doesn't change. It's weird. So I read it and I have a response to it, and I either want to do it or I don't want to do it. And if I do want to do it, a lot of the feelings and thoughts I had when I very first read it are the most, they kind of end up in the movie.
How much of your choices are based on that moment, that script, and an overall career arc?
There is no career arc for me. It's about finding good material and working with good directors. The career takes care of itself. It is what it is, you know. This was a film that I always loved the script. I met with Scott, and for some reason our scheduling didn't quite work out. So we both stayed loyal to it for probably 3 years. And it was one that I didn't want to let go. I was like, there's something really strong about this story and this script, and I want to do it. And eventually it all worked out. But you know, I think if you try and plot a career in that way, it's a very dodgy thing to do, because it should be about just doing stuff because you want to do it. And I think a huge part of it for an actor is having appetite to do it. If you really want to do a part, it usually means you'll be better than if you're doing it for other reasons.
Sure. How much of this is the fact that fame or profile didn't come to you till later? You know, like the fact that when you were 30s when people really started to hear about you.
I mean, personally, I think it was a good thing, because I think that, you know, it's very disorientating when all that happens. And if you're very, very young and you haven't experienced it, it can really throw you off center. And it's a lot to navigate through. And I think the most important thing is you have to keep your eye on the work. You have to remember that when you stand in front of the camera or you stand up on that stage, that's when you have to deliver. Everything else is what it is, but that's the crucial thing. And it's very hard for young people, if they haven't experienced, to get all this attention and all these distractions, people pulling at them in every different way. And it's important to always remember that you have to keep your eye on the main thing.
And you like being a father, right? Some guys have a tough time balancing the two. It's men and women, but for you, you make a conscious effort to work and then to be a stay-at-home dad, right?
I think it's just, yeah, about that balance. I mean, you know, there are huge advantages doing what I'm doing. I travel, I see incredible places. The kids come, they see incredible things, they have incredible experiences. But the thing about acting is it's very much on and off, and kids love routine. If someone comes home and puts them to bed every night, even if that's just the 20 minutes they see Dad, they love that because they know where they're at. With me, I can be home for 4 months every day, be around them, take them to school, do all that, but then I disappear. I literally go out of their lives for an equivalent maybe amount of time. And it's hard for kids that, but it's, you know, there are huge pluses to what I do as well. So you just make it work as best you can.
What kind of conversations do you have with the kids on the eve before you leave? Like, what's that moment like?
It's tough, and it gets tougher, you know. My girls are now 12 and 10, and it gets harder. When they're younger, time's a weird thing. Yeah. But as you get older, they're kind of aware. And it's tough because, like, you know, I will have spent a substantial amount of time at home, and then suddenly they can feel, oh, the time's coming, he's off, he's going to do a movie. But you make it work as best you can.
You come from Coventry, right? Which is the place that they used to joke about, that if you're going to be ostracized in England, they get sent to Coventry. Yeah. How much of that informs who you are, informs that part of the country?
Yeah, I mean, it's a Midlands town, and I moved to London when I was very young. I went to drama school when I was 19, so I've lived in London ever since then.
And so you look at was it a big change? Was it a culture shock to go from one to the other?
It was huge, yeah. And I mean, there are career-defining things, I think, that happen, or life-defining things, really. And the one for me of being in a town like that, I was unemployed for 2 years there after I left school. I wanted to be an actor, and I was incredibly fortunate and got into the Royal Academy in London, and that was probably the biggest thing that has ever happened, because that set me on track. It would have been very hard being an actor coming from there, and you know, there wouldn't have been much opportunity there for.
What year was that? Roughly when you
80, I went to RADA in 84.
So pre-Tin Machine, right? Is that pre? Because David Bowie's a big part of your life, right?
David, yeah. I've been a huge fan of his my whole life. Yeah.
I mean, I don't believe almost anything I read, but I really want to believe this, that you used to change your hair color based on Bowie's hair color?
At school, yeah.
Yeah?
I remember the headmaster saying to me once, "Is this for some play or is this just for show, Owen?" And I said, "It's just for show."
What's your favorite Bowie song? Can you have one?
There's too many. Yeah, there's too many.
The correct answer is Life on Mars. I'm just, not that you don't know your David Bowie. Stick around, we're going to come back and play a little game with Clive Owen. A lot of people talk about, he's like, oh, you have Clive Owen on, he's so cool. Fine. Can Clive Owen make this cool? What is this? We'll show you right after this. Are you like prepared to make things cool?
This is Clive, the performing monkey.
That's right. Listen, the good news here is that if you make it cool, you're cool. If you don't, your whole career's over.
Okay. Right? The pressure's on.
So here's the line that you have to deliver. Oh boy. Okay. The line is. Back here with Clive Owen. Boys are back. His name is new movie. You talked about important career-defining moments. You were 13 when you played The Artful Dodger.
I did.
It's a very big character to play.
Yeah, I've been playing it ever since.
You just keep going back to it, is that what it is? What would The Artful Dodger do here? You hate when you get named the most sexiest whatever in the world, right? That's not, you're not... But,
oh, I hate it. It's terrible.
But I just wondered, you had it a few years in a row, and then when all of a sudden you're not the guy, like somebody else gets that role, is there a party that goes, what happened to me?
Oh, yeah. I consider that much more important than any movie I've done.
Never mind an Oscar nomination, never mind a Golden Globe. What does People magazine think of me? Are you like prepared to make things cool?
This is Clive, the performing monkey.
That's right. Listen, the good news here is that if you make it cool, you're cool. If you don't, your whole career is over.
Okay. Right? The pressure's on.
So here's the line that you have to deliver. Oh, boy. Okay. The line is, I'm going to hand this to you so you can read it. I guess I've got to face facts. I'm a 36-year-old man who wears Depends.
Who wears?
Depends. Those would be those adult diapers when you're incontinent.
Yeah.
So you have to make that cool.
Okay. I guess I've got to face facts. I'm a 36-year-old man who wears Depends.
Oh, there's more. Actually, but I could see you doing this line with a cleaver in your hand. It takes. Oh, here, you read it. Make that cool.
It takes a tough man to make a tender chicken.
All right, one more. One more. I'm going to let you pick this one now.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Thank you. This will be the coolest of the lot.
Imagine you're on a set, you've already prepared for a character a certain way, and then the director says, Clive, I want to try it differently. This is, and you can go back to this part.
Yeah. Take two. Take two. This is so cheesy. Sometimes when we touch, the honest is too much.
Nicely done. Daniel. The film is called The Boys Are Back. It's in theaters now. Clive Owen, everyone.
The World of Good News is brought to you by TD Canada Trust. Banking can be this comfortable.
The World of Good News.
All right, you're back here on the program. Come on in. I have two good news stories. I'd like to start, if I can, with Canada's economy. So much of last year was about how bad the economy was, but guess what? The IMF says that the economy here starts growing again. It's going to grow. They're actually forecasting it'll grow by 2.1% next year. That's right. The IMF has used the R word, not recession, recovery. It says the recovery started. Financial markets are healing, which is good news for everyone, especially Wall Street CEOs who can finally get back to the kinds of bonuses they deserve. Next, some good news about good news. I want to tell you about a 12-year-old boy from Orlando, Max Jones. Here's Max. Look at Max working hard. He does a weekly newscast online called Weekend News Today, and every story little Maxie does has a happy or uplifting bent to it. The site already, by the way, gets 5,000 hits a day in that neighborhood. He's even assembled a team of teenage reporters. They file stories from around the world, from Chicago, Johannesburg, Beijing, or as you would say, Beijing, Seoul, all together. Max says he's doing it because in tough times he believes people need to hear uplifting stories, which is really nice. Although, interesting because we actually started doing this good news story segment before he did for similar reasons. So Max, expect a call from our lawyers. That's your good news. All right. That's it for the program tonight. Thank you very much for being a part of it. Look, here comes our little website. There's our website right there. Go check out stuff. By the way, Monday on the program, the creator of CSI, Anthony Zeiker, and very successful author Mitch Albom will be here. Thanks to Lord Christopher Monkton and Clive Owen. And on that note, here's tomorrow's headline today.